Today, we are diving into a really fascinating paper from the Journal of Personality, and it tackles a huge question. What's the link between our political worldview and our idea of a good life? The findings here might just change how you think about happiness, meaning, and what it even means to live well. So let's get right into it.
Okay, so the researchers kick things off with a pretty bold question, one that a lot of previous science seemed to have an answer for. Is a good life, an inherently conservative one? It's a provocative way to start, for sure, and it really sets the stage for a super interesting journey through the data.
Now, for a long time, the answer to that question seemed to be, yeah, kinda. Study after study found this really consistent link. People who identify as conservative tend to report being happier and feeling like their lives have more meaning. This was basically the established wisdom. But, as we're about to see, that's not the whole story, not even close.
So here's the crucial idea that flips everything on its head. A good life might not be just one thing. The researchers behind this paper argue that we need to think bigger, beyond just feeling happy. They break it down into 3 distinct paths to well-being. All right, first up, you've got the happy life. This is the one we all know. It's all about feeling good, seeking comfort, pleasure, stability, and just having those positive vibes. You can think of it as hedonic well-being, the pursuit of satisfaction and good feelings. Second, there's the meaningful life. This path, what scientists call eudaimonic well-being, is less about those fleeting good moods and more about having a sense of purpose. It's that feeling that your life has significance, that it all makes sense, and that you're part of something bigger than just yourself. And that brings us to the third path. And honestly, this is the most intriguing one, the psychologically rich life. This isn't about being happy, or even purposeful in that traditional sense. It's about a life that's full of interesting, new, and often complex experiences. The kind of stuff that really changes your perspective on the world. Now, what's really cool is that these different paths connect to our personalities in different ways. And while a trait like extroversion might predict happiness, the single strongest predictor for a psychologically rich life is a trait called openness to experience. And that is a major clue. People who are high in this trait are curious, they're imaginative, they're drawn to new things. And here's the kicker. Other research shows this trait is usually linked with less political conservatism. So you'd think people living a psychologically rich life would be less conservative, right? It just makes sense. And that's exactly what the researchers thought too. But when they first crunched the numbers, they found something really puzzling. And here's a direct quote from the paper. Now, a zero-order correlation sounds fancy, but it just means the first, most straightforward look at the relationship between two things. And that first look showed absolutely nothing. No connection. There was just no direct link between having a psychologically rich life and someone's political views. And you can see that initial finding right here on this chart. The relationship is basically a flat line. It looks like a dead end. People with psychologically rich lives weren't more liberal. They weren't more conservative. They were just all over the place. So what does that mean? Was the whole theory wrong? Is there really no connection here? Or, and this is the big question, could something else be hiding in the data, masking the real relationship? This is where the real detective work begins. Okay, let's get to the key that unlocks this entire puzzle. It's a statistical concept called a suppressor variable. I know, it sounds super complicated, but stick with me, because the idea behind it is actually really simple and intuitive. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to figure out how good a solo violinist is, but she's playing with a massive, loud orchestra. The sound of all those other instruments might totally drown her out, right? It'd be impossible to judge her real skill. But what if you could digitally remove the orchestra and just listen to her solo track? Suddenly, you'd hear her talent loud and clear. That orchestra, that is the suppressor variable. And this is exactly what was happening in the data. Happiness and meaning were the loud orchestra. See, because all 3 types of a good life are kind of related, the strong connection between happiness, meaning, and conservatism was totally masking the true relationship for psychological richness. The scientists needed to statistically remove the orchestra to finally hear that solo track. And when they did, wow, look at this. This is the big reveal. Once they statistically controlled for the influence of happiness and meaning, the relationship completely flips on its head. A happy life and a meaningful life, they're still positively linked with conservatism. But psychological richness, all on its own, is now clearly and consistently associated with less conservatism. The solo track was playing a completely different tune all along.
So, what does this hidden relationship actually tell us? What does this mean for our understanding of a good life and how we see the world? Well, when the researchers combined the data from all 6 of their studies, the patterns became crystal clear. A happy life was strongly linked to system justification, which is basically the belief that our society is fair and just as it is. A meaningful life was tied to the Protestant work ethic, the idea that hard work leads to success. But a psychologically rich life, that solo track, was linked to the exact opposite: less justification for the system and a greater desire for social change. So you can almost see 2 different mindsets emerging here. On one hand, you have a life centered on happiness and meaning, which often prioritizes stability, tradition, and seeing the current system as fair. And on the other hand, you have a life centered on psychological richness, which prioritizes new experiences, change, and, well, questioning that very same system.
At the end of the day, what this all shows us is that there isn't one single, one-size-fits-all good life that matches up with only one worldview. By broadening our definition, by looking past just happiness and meaning, we see a much richer, more complex picture. It suggests that different and even opposing political views might not just be about disagreements on policy. They might be rooted in pursuing fundamentally different but equally valid versions of a life well lived.
And that leaves us with a final question to think about. These paths aren't mutually exclusive, of course, but they do emphasize very different values. So, when you look at your own priorities, is it comfort, is it purpose, or is it new experiences? What kind of good life are you building?